we just get the AV right. Hey, welcome to the Sports Writers Festival, and for our third session of the day. There are all kinds of clever, and then there's dumb. No, it's just me just then. Welcome to the Sports Writers Festival, and to this very special session that I'm really excited to present. Andrew Mangan is someone who I've been reading and listening to for a long time. I thought, what the hell? Sports writing is not just about what's in books or what's in newspapers. It's now also what people write on the net and blogs, and they've become an integral part of my diet when it comes to reading about the team that I love and the game that I love. So why don't I get in contact with Andrew Mangan, who writes the ÄrseBlog and has been doing so since 2002, and see if he'll come out. And here he is. So he's joining us here tonight. Give him a big round of applause. As you know, he's been a pioneer. He's been writing his blog since 2002. His first podcast was in 2006, and you're all probably readers and listeners of his work, so you know that it's grown to an international audience, a community of hundreds of thousands. He writes for any number of newspapers, ESPN, and other sites as well, and he has learned to make a living from the thing that he loves, and also that kills his soul, which is Arsenal. And this is something of a self-help group tonight, so we can all share in that experience together. So, Andrew, welcome to Australia.
Thank you very much.
First of all, I've got to say, when I picked Andrew up from the airport, he looked like the living dead. I don't think he'd ever travelled that far or for that long ever in your life.
No, like it's been since my mid-20s that I've stayed awake that long, and that was.
For different reasons.
That was for very different reasons. So yeah, it was a bit traumatic, but you know, we got here in the end, and here we are. It's been brilliant. The 2 days here so far have been fantastic. Great weather, which I brought with me from Ireland.
Naturally enough.
But yeah, so far so good.
The fact that you can come to a place like this and 100 or so people will turn up and want to talk to you about the game that you love is I guess, an emblem and a sign of just how global football is, and how the technology that you use, the internet with your blog and with your podcast, has connected you to a much wider world of people who share the same passion as you do.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of the very first things we noticed, or I noticed when I set up the website, is just how many people from all over the world were Arsenal fans. I know we tend to think perhaps that football clubs exist within their own communities, and I think that's traditionally been true. Arsenal is, the club of North London. I saw
That's the away section over there.
That's no longer the case. Is that clubs have fans from all over the world, and we can see the way that clubs operate now is that they're very aware of that they travel to places on tour. They go to Australia, they go to China, they go to America for not just football reasons. Obviously they want to build their brands, and we can all have our issues with how that's a thing, but it is amazing to be able to follow the team that you love and be part of a community, whether it's online or offline, and know that there are people from all over the world who share that passion and who share the desire for the club to be successful and what it means to be an Arsenal fan.
Yeah, I think it does start out as a branding exercise, these trips, but I think even you talk to people at Arsenal, and you do like I have, who came here to Sydney in particular,
Yep.
And they're actually, it changes for them once they get here. They realise what they've got is a community of committed people who are just as passionate about the football club as anywhere else in the world, and they understand that their relationship and their responsibility to the fans is every bit as important.
Yeah. I mean, it's different. I mean, I don't think you can say it's the same experience, because if you're in America, you're getting up really early in the morning. If you guys here are either staying up really late or getting up early in the morning, but people have their own experiences of their football club. I don't think there's any one way to be a supporter. If you want to be divisive and say you have to be from North London to be a true Arsenal supporter, to go to every game to be a true Arsenal supporter, I don't think that's the case. It doesn't mean that everybody's experience is the same, but if you're a fan, you're a fan, and it doesn't matter where in the world you are.
Let's talk about how you became a fan. Do you remember your first experience of football? You went, That's my thing. Were you? How old were you?
I always remember playing football. Like my little brother is 3 years younger than me, so when I was about 7 or 8, we would play football on the front lawn. It's a long story, but I lived in a castle in England.
That's a story we're going to have to hear.
It's not that I'm royalty, but my dad ran a hotel.
What was it called?
England. It was called Cave Castle Hotel.
Cave Castle.
And they had big gardens out the front of it. So I always remember playing football with my brother, but because I was 7 and he was 4, yeah, but of course, and the torture in the dungeon and all that. But because he was so much younger than me, I would give him a head start. We'd play up to 50 and I'd give him a 49-0 head start. and I'd win every time, which drove him crazy. But my first Arsenal experience was the 1979 FA Cup final. It's the first game that I can really remember watching. And I think it taught me a lesson, you know, because you have this expectation or desire for your club to do well, and Arsenal are cruising. They're 2-0 up with just a couple of minutes to go, and then Manchester United scored twice, and you're thinking, what is happening? Yeah. This is not the way things are supposed to go. And before you can get too terrified, Alan Sunderland scores the winning goal, and we win the cup. But it gives you a lesson, I think, that football can change very quickly. And obviously the following year in the FA Cup final, we lost to West Ham, to Trevor Brooking, scoring that goal. And it's hard to get your head around that as a kid, because I think West Ham were in the second division at that point, and you go, well, how is this happening? So maybe those early experiences help you deal with the disappointments that football throws at you, but that was...
How did you feed your football addiction at that age? Because these days we can listen to your podcast, we can read your blog, and it's all at our fingertips. But back then you had to kind of work at being a fan, particularly because you weren't in London, you were living up in Yorkshire way.
Yeah.
So how did you, were you a newspaper hound, or would you hang out for a particular magazine? What was it?
Yeah, we always would look at you'd look at the newspaper or the football results in the newspaper. There was the Observer Football Handbook, this little book that you could get. There was Roy of the Rovers. There was Shoot magazine. There was a Match magazine, if I can remember. I can't really. It's so many years ago. But just everything that was possible to consume from a footballing point of view, you looked for it, which wasn't much, but it was there. And then, of course, you're just playing football all the time as a kid, whether it was in school or when you start to get into teams. The Panini football albums, everybody collecting the stickers and trading the stickers, and you go, oh my God, look, I've got these big pile of stickers. What was the thing? It was swap, or got, swap, whatever.
Got him, swap him, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it was all of those things and everything that you did on the playground to just be part of football in your own little way.
But you were an Arsenal fan living up north, so were you one out? Or was it everyone else a Leeds
fan?
I remember,
a Leeds fan. I remember one particular guy. I remember his name to this day. Ian Bessie was his name. And he was one of those guys who would put your arm behind your back and he would say, "You got to say you support Leeds," and I would never do it, and it really hurt. It really hurt. So I do occasionally scour the Yorkshire newspapers to see if he's in jail or something like that, because I hope he is.
Yeah. Or enjoying their travails in the lower leagues. As well. So you hung in there as an Arsenal fan.
Yeah.
The other really sort of rites of passage moment is your first shirt or your first jumper. What was yours?
The first shirt, I think, was the '79 away shirt with the collar, the yellow and blue. And my dad got it for me, and he laid it out on his bed, and it was made of that weird toweling material. It was so heavy. The blue nylon shorts and the socks. So
you were a full kit wanker?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's true, I was.
We've all been there.
I was, but proud of it. Proud of it.
And Arsenal was not an easy team to follow in the 80s.
No, but I mean, it was difficult in the 80s anyway, because we'd moved back to Ireland at that point, so it was hard because there wasn't that much football on the television, and obviously Arsenal did not have really a very successful 1980s in terms of what they did on the pitch. The first time I ever saw Arsenal live there was a really bad weather in the UK in about 1985 or 1986, and the first division was called off. There was just no games being played, but Arsenal had to play a game to just keep fit. So they came to Dublin, and they played against Shamrock Rovers, a team in Dublin, and I thought, well, this is going to be great. going to stand on a terrace. I'm going to watch Arsenal. It's going to be amazing. We lost.
The Shamrock
We
Rovers.
lost to Shamrock Rovers. So, you know, what
Welcome
can
to
you
your
do?
new life.
Yeah.
So, what was your first Highbury experience? When did you first sort of
Oh
walk
God, I
through the
can't remember. It
gates?
would have been like late '80s.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I can't even remember what the game was at this point. You know,
But your
it's
overall impressions of being
just
the old
just the walking out and seeing the pitch and the greenness of the pitch and everything else, and just everything that goes on around a football game is what's really exciting as well. You know, the coming out of the tube and just all the people
whole
selling,
ritual.
the programs and the hot dogs and everything else. It's amazing.
Do you think that the game now is much more accessible in a sense because of technology, and the stadiums are much more comfortable? Is anything being lost in translation from? I don't want to romanticise stadiums and the football experience of that time, because as we know from what happened at Hillsborough and Heysel and places like that, Bradford, it could be fairly brutal.
Yeah.
But people do like to talk about those experiences and that tribalism as something that's been lost to the game.
I think in general, yeah. When you look back. The development of football from the all-seater stadiums, I think every stadium lost something in terms of the atmosphere, and I think it's to do with terracing and standing and just being part of a throng of people. I just think it's organically you make more noise, there's more atmosphere when you have that in the stadium. So it's been really interesting to see the move towards safe standing and how that might develop in football grounds over the coming years, because I do think it's really important, and I think it's also a way, perhaps, if football clubs are committed to the future of the game and the future of the football clubs, it's a way to ensure that the next generation can get in. I know Arsenal do stuff with their €10 or £10 tickets for Carling Cup or Carabao Cup or whatever it's called these days, which are great. Well, I mean, they're great initiatives because you need to get the young fans into the ground.
We could really notice it the other day. I mean, the energy in the stadium was remarkable compared to some of the games we've experienced, because there was a much younger audience who maybe it was their first time at a game, and you could sense it just watching it on the television.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really important. But I mean, you know, football is becoming more and more costly, and Arsenal are not a cheap club to follow if you want to buy tickets or be a member or be a season ticket holder. So I think it's important that the clubs look at all those things and look at ways of improving the atmosphere, because if you do have a good atmosphere within a stadium, if it is a bit intimidating, then it can make a difference. It can transmit itself to the players. I mean, it's not to say that that's what drives the players, but it can help.
Well, it does exist, doesn't it? In the Bundesliga, there are, like Dortmund and places like that, they have safe standing, so it's something that has been successfully used. 1989 is a watershed year for the club. You would have been 18 years of age, maybe a little younger. What are your memories of that incredible title run?
I don't really remember a huge amount about the title run, but I can remember a lot about the game because it was on a Friday night, and that was the year that I was doing my leaving cert, which are the final exams in Ireland, and I had every Friday I had like a French lesson, extra French lessons, which I didn't go to that night. And I went to watch the game with my cousins. I had a cousin who was an Arsenal fan, another cousin who was a Liverpool fan, and we watched the game there, and I can just remember sort of lying down on the ground, kicking my legs in the air like an excited turtle, not being able to get back up when that Michael Thomas goal went in. It was just incredible. Yeah, I mean, I think it was a real pivotal moment for the football club, because it had been so long since the last league title. They'd won the League Cup in 1987. They'd lost the League Cup final in 1988. But, you know, to beat that Liverpool team at that time, I think people forget how dominant Liverpool were and how good Liverpool were, and how the idea of going to Anfield and winning itself was, that was going to be tricky, but to win by 2 clear goals, you know, you couldn't stop Liverpool scoring. I think they hammered West Ham something like 5-1 in their previous game, so that meant we had to win by the 2 goals. So it was a remarkable achievement, and when you look at what, you know, those players, many of those players did as their careers went on and how they won things, I think it really gave them and gave the club belief that they could go on and win things.
So in 2001 or 2002, what were you doing before you started doing the ÄrseBlog? What was your career looking like? What were you doing professionally before this started?
Yeah, I was working for the Irish equivalent of Telstra, or the
big telco.
Big telecom company. I was a manager in internet support.
So having a great time.
Yeah, having a really great time. spreadsheets, statistics, you know, asking people to just answer more phone calls, which was terrible. It was mind-numbing. But I moved to Spain. We'd gone on holidays to Spain, and we decided to move there, and came back from holidays and said, we're moving to Spain. And everyone went, yeah, of course you are. Everyone comes back from holidays and says they're going to go to the place where they're on holidays. And we went, okay. And we sold our house and moved to Spain. And I didn't really know what I was going to do, to be perfectly honest. I was trying to become a web designer, which is why I started the site. I was trying to learn how to do it so I could be a designer and sell websites to people. And that's why I started the site, because I was thinking I need something I can update regularly, something there's loads of content about, something that you can just try new things all the time. And I figured football was something that always had that. There was matches and reports and transfers and all those kind of things. And I started the site. I'd been reading a lot of blogs. Blogs were just starting to become a thing. And I said, well, I'll make a site about Arsenal. Why don't I make a blog about Arsenal? And well, what else would you call a blog about Arsenal but ÄrseBlog? So that was it. That's how it came about. So it was something I was doing kind of in my spare time for the most part.
So do you remember your first blog? Do you remember what you
yeah, actually, the first tagline on the site was ÄrseBlog, the inconsequential ramblings of an Arsenal fan, which was pretty terrible. I think I said something in my first blog about how ÄrseBlog is born to a ripple of no applause and no fanfare, something like that. I can't remember what it was. But I would just, you know, I updated it every day. It wasn't quite as lengthy as it was now, and it was maybe a bit sillier and what have you. But it just interested me and kept it going. And it was at the end of the 2001-2002 season in which Arsenal did the double, and there was so much to enjoy about watching the games or listening to the games, because at that point you still couldn't see all the games. You had to maybe listen to some of them on the radio, and that in itself is an exciting experience that I think lots of people you kind of lose that a bit. There isn't so much listening to football on the radio anymore, because everything sounds like a goal. Yeah. Depending on what happens, whichever end of the pitch it is, it's like, oh shit, we're gonna concede or we're gonna score. So there's an excitement to that. But yeah, it was just that, and kept it going from there.
So how long did it take? So you've written your first one, and you're beavering away doing the blog. When did you start to sense that, oh, this is catching on? People are starting to become regular viewers of the site, and then maybe subscribing to the email. How long did that take?
A little while, because at the start there were no comments on the site, and then someone said, you know, you should have a comment section, and I was like, okay. So we put in this comment section, and we could get up to 15 comments a day back then. It was really kicking, but it was a way then of gauging how many people were reading and listening, or reading, because we could see, 25 comments today, it's been a busy day. Yeah. And just, you would see people come back, you would get regular people coming back, and very quickly there started to become an element of community to it, that people would chat to each other throughout the day, not necessarily about Arsenal, but they would just chat about their own lives and work and what was going on. So it took a little while. And then I think what really gave it a kick was, there were two things. One was the fact that broadband was being brought in and invented, so people
We're still waiting for it here.
Yeah, I noticed. I
did read your post today about how Wi-Fi was just killing you. Welcome to our world.
Thank you. Yeah. That was starting to be rolled out, so people had more access to the internet, more regular access to the internet, and they could stay on it longer because nobody was going, hang that up, I'm waiting for a phone call. You know, in the old days when you used dial-up. And the other thing was, I got a job which meant I had to be in work every morning at 9 o'clock, and my posting was generally sporadic. It could be at 10 in the morning, it could be at 5 in the evening, it could be both. But because I was doing this job, I had to post every morning before I went out. And I think what happened was, it became like a morning edition for people. It became like they get to their desks, they get to work, and they would turn on and read ÄrseBlog, and it was there every single morning. And that sort of gave it a kick. The regularity and the frequency of the publishing helped it push on, I think.
And we were surprised at the reach. I mean, we were reading it here, no doubt in America they were reading, and I suppose everywhere, Africa. I've spent a bit of time in Africa. Every third person's wearing an Arsenal shirt in parts of Africa.
Yeah.
So Nigeria, places like that.
Yeah, I mean, was it surprising? I guess it was just part and parcel of being on the internet that all of a sudden, I mean, if I was just publishing a little pamphlet at home, my reach is very, very limited to the people who I might hand it out to who would say, get away from me. But because you're publishing something online and it's available to everybody everywhere at any time, it's inevitable that it's going to find that reach. I mean, I think, obviously the biggest audience was in the UK, but very quickly America and Australia, Ireland, right throughout Europe, it just caught on. So yeah.
Because there is, and you will tell me, I guess, is it still a fanzine culture still? Because it used to go to Highbury and there'd be any number of fanzines being sold pre-match on the streets.
Not anymore.
Has the internet killed the fanzine?
A little bit, yeah. I think the Gooner are
still
finishing up. I think this is their final season in print.
That's sad.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the way that, it's like newspapers. So no, I don't think that's really a thing anymore in the UK. I mean, everything has moved online because, again, it's how do you reach the most people, and that's the way you do it.
Let's talk a little bit about the football. I mean, in that period of time that you were starting to do it, Arsenal were in a intense rivalry with Manchester United and were contending for titles. Remember those days? Yes, there was a time. There was a time. And as you said, 2001 would have been an amazing time to be riding it. Won the league at Old Trafford. Do you remember much about what was different about the Arsenal team then and the culture of the club then than what we saw, say, at the AGM early this week and the sort of club that we've become now?
Respect from this side of the room.
What's different? I mean, I think it was really a period of time that was, I don't want to say it's unique, but it was just so good. And I think we were so lucky to have a manager who was so fresh and exciting and right at the top of his powers, along with a team that had some, like when you look back at that period of time when you had Dennis Bergkamp, Thierry Henry, Robert Pires, Patrick Vieira, 4 of the best players in the world at Arsenal. It's hard to get your head around that at this period because there's been an equalization, I think, in talent. But you always felt like something special was happening at that time. In a way, it's kind of easy to forget after the first double in '98 that there was a period of 3 years where we didn't really compete as well as we should have with Manchester United, and we came back with a bang then. But that rivalry as well, I think, was really special, and that helped fuel so many of the memories, because as much as football is about loving what we do and enjoying what we do, it's also about taking pleasure in making other people miserable and hating them and hating what they do. And I think that was true of both sides at that time. It's perhaps softened down the years, and you can see the relationship between Wenger and Ferguson now is much more amicable. But at the time,
that actually hurt, didn't it? Because we suddenly realised we were no longer a threat when Sir Alex was
saying...
I
mean, I think that's maybe part of it. I think it's true when people get older and mellow out a little bit, but the teams hated each other, the managers hated each other, the fans hated each other. There was nothing,
pizza involved.
Yeah, there was pizza involved. Good old Cesc. There was nothing like those games where you could sit there watching them and you were like literally shaking about what was going to happen and how it was going to happen, and were they going to do us or were we going to do them? And you win the league at Old Trafford, and it's just amazing to make them as unhappy as that made them. And it was a really brilliant period. And I know that there was a quote from Arsene Wenger where he talked about when you've had caviar, it's difficult to go back to sausage. I think that it's true though, in a way. It was so good. It was just not once in a lifetime. I hope it's not once in a lifetime, because I hope we can get back, there again, or create another team that is as good as that. But
it's hard to see.
It is a little bit hard to see at this moment in time. But I think we have to look back on those times and really. I don't know that we took them for granted, but I think we have to look back on them now and think that was, one of the best periods we're going to enjoy as Arsenal.
Yeah, I think we got lulled into believing the good times were going to last forever. But let's look back and say, of all those United games, and there were some epics, is there one that gave you the most satisfaction? There are some that were heartbreakers,
winning the league, the 1-0 when Wiltord scored the goal and Kanu, I don't know if anyone remembers a TV replay, Wiltord is like that and Kanu leaps over him and you think, holy cow, he's really good. You didn't realize Wiltord was on his knees. I thought Kanu had just gone over the top of him. I was like, oh wow, there's no end to that guy's talents. That was a really great one. I really enjoyed the one, there was a 3-0 at Highbury, which was Freddie Ljungberg's debut, where he came on and scored with his first touch as an Arsenal player. He just lobbed it over Peter Schmeichel, but I think could have been the first goal was a Tony Adams header. Just a sensational performance that we played them off the park. And I have to give an honourable mention, of course, to the 2005 FA Cup final where they played us off the park. I don't know how they didn't win that game, and then they lost it on penalties. Yeah. So again,
that game was almost the full stop on that era, wasn't it? Because it was Patrick Vieira's last game for the club, and off he went, and things were never quite the same. Yeah,
true, but I don't think it was just to do with Patrick Vieira. There were other factors involved there. But yeah, when it comes to United, those were good moments.
You wrote the book together, which a few people have got here. You put that together about the team that won the title unbeaten and went on the invincible 49-game streak. What did you learn about that team and what made them so special?
Is that
in writing the book?
They just the spirit that they had within that team. There was something. Whether it can ever be reproduced, I don't know. It's just the right blend of people, the right blend of characters, the right blend of experience, people who'd been there and done that, the right blend of talent, amazing talent within that team. And if you hear any of the players interviewed, they'll talk about how they just refused to be beaten. I remember distinctly during that season people saying, we are drawing too many games. Yeah. And it's like, okay, maybe we are, but then you get to the end of the season and you think, well, hang on, some of those draws could have been defeats, and that's the difference. That's the difference between that team and other teams, is that it wasn't just about playing teams off the park, it was about refusing to lose. And if that was because you scored a late goal to equalise late on, or some of the games, I think we drew with Leicester, and I can't remember all of the results, but you look at some of them and you think about that team and you think, well, they should have beaten them 3 or 4-0. That wasn't the case, and that's not the reality of football, is that you can't beat those teams all the time. But they just simply refused to lose. They would not lose. And I think it was something really special within that team that they came together at the right time, all those characters. It was incredible.
And they held each other accountable, didn't they? I mean, you write about in the book how there was an accountability to each other to perform at the highest level every time they played.
Yeah, it was that. And if
driven by some of the senior players of the team.
Or Jens Lehmann would kill you.
Yeah. And now he's back on the coaching staff. I think he needs the license to kill once again.
I think we need to give Jens a big stick. we know that Arsene Wenger is not the most confrontational manager that ever will be. Yeah, exactly. So Jens can be the bad cop. Like really bad cop, but I think
he would do a great job, no doubt about it. And with that team as well, what was great about it was that there were players who were prepared to play a role, who maybe weren't at the heart of everything, but they were so interchangeable in the sense that they all played to a standard, and players could fit, like a Ray Parlour or an Edu. These guys could play a role within that system, which is something we don't have today.
Yeah,
so
or even some of the players who at that time were, quite maligned. Pascal Sigon was never going to be the greatest defender in the world, but he still did a job that season. He came in and played his part in making sure that a team went through unbeaten, and even going into the season, Arsene Wenger made a decision to move Kolo Touré to centre half. In pre-season, I think we played Rangers or Celtic, and that was the first time anybody had ever seen Kolo Touré at centre half. And can you imagine him doing something like that now, taking like a utility player and going, right, I'm going to play him as well? People would go bananas. I mean, it worked out.
Arsenal fan TV would melt.
Yeah, maybe. I'll make no comment on that. But yeah, I mean, look, everybody came in and played their part. Jeremy Aliadier, Edu, Parlour, guys who were considered fringe players. They had to come in and they had to do a job. And maybe because the structure, the overall structure of the team was so good, and there was such support from those senior players, a Thierry Henry at the very, very top of his game. That would have helped, of course, but yeah, everybody had to dig in.
Sliding doors moment. If Arsenal had won the 2006 Champions League final, would things be different now? Do you think we got close? It was one of those days that Because it was one of those moments where you
Yeah.
know, it would have fulfilled the club's destiny in that sense, and things, you know, it would have looked different. Maybe Henri stays, who knows? But yeah, would it have changed anything? Do you think?
It would have made my journey home from the stadium a lot more enjoyable. I got lost, unfortunately, and no taxi would pick us up because we were wearing football shirts. Yeah, it's hard to think that it wouldn't have had anything other than a positive impact on the club, and what a thing it would have been. You know, it was one of those weird nights where you're just so disappointed, but also really proud. I can remember the fans in the stadium, you know, just standing up and singing for their team, and there's something about that as well which makes you proud. Again, you go back to the sense of community of being a fan of a football club, and you know, to be there when you're winning things is easy, but you know, to stand up and do that when you've had maybe the biggest disappointment you know, that you can think of, to be that close to winning the Champions League, and 2 offside goals, 1 offside goal. I'm not bitter.
We can't re-litigate and can
but
we?
yeah, I think it would of course have had a positive effect, and I think a positive effect on some of those players who maybe that was the start of a period of self-doubt for some of them and for the club as well.
Wenger's been there the whole time, you know, through the things that we've spoken about. I think all of us have a complex relationship with him as fans of the club. Our admiration is deep, but our sense of frustration and bewilderment as to why things haven't changed in the interim. You know, if you had to sort of sum up your sense of who he is as a person, if you've written about him every day for the last 15 years, what is your sense of who he is when he's alone with his thoughts?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I can't really answer that because you're asking me to get inside his head, and that is a minefield that I don't think anybody's ready for. I mean, I can only tell you that, you know, as a man, I think he's just amazing at times, really intelligent, really smart. I think he represents the football club really well and has done for 20 years. And then you wonder, you know, as a man, you can admire him. As a manager, he can really frustrate you, and I think it's becoming more necessary to perhaps separate the two things and look at him in two different ways. They've come to save me from this question. Look, you know, personally, I would have liked to have seen a change in the summer. I think it would have been an amazing time for him to go out. I think he deserves to go out on a high, and I think going out on a high when you stop Chelsea winning the double and winning the cup for Arsenal, there you go, taking some pleasure in making other people miserable, which is great when it's Chelsea as well. But obviously the club, well, maybe not so much the club, the owner had different ideas, and it is what it is. So yeah, I don't know what else to say about that situation.
It's nothing we can impact it, and that's part of the issues as fans. We get very frustrated. We want great things for our football club. We can't understand why these decisions aren't plainly obvious.
Yeah, well look, I mean, the other thing is because he is unique at the moment in that he's the only manager who's lasted that length of time. Nobody else has done it, and I don't think anybody else will do it again. That's the thing. We've moved beyond We've moved into a culture where I don't think that can happen. The only way you can be a manager for 20 years at one club is if you win all the time and win for 20 years, and I don't think anybody can really do that. Nobody can do it with that level of consistency. So yeah, we have to see what happens this season, and I think what's the most frustrating is when Arsenal lose a game or don't play the way that you want them to play. You know that you've seen it before, you've seen it manifest itself in many different ways, and really there is only one common denominator, and that's the manager.
You talked about the Schadenfreude, taking pleasure in other people's misery.
Yeah.
Which club gives you the greatest pleasure? Obviously, the obvious thing would be to say our friends from Tottenham Hotspur, but is it Chelsea or is it Spurs that give you the greatest pleasure to watching them? Just on a personal level.
I think.
Which car crash do you prefer?
Which car crash?
It
depends on the context of it. Like, for example, I thoroughly enjoyed Chelsea drawing 2-2 with Tottenham last season, right at the end of the season, because Tottenham were still up there challenging with Leicester, and of course, the idea of Tottenham winning the league is just unthinkable. I'm sorry. So in that sense, you can enjoy a Chelsea good result for Chelsea. So it's contextual, of course. I'm pretty much equal opportunity though, in that I hate everyone apart from Arsenal, and I want them all to lose at all times. But you have to look at the context of the games and look at the context of the situations and say, well, what's the. Sometimes it's the least worst option you have to go for.
I suppose they've given us some great end of season finales. The game at Newcastle a couple of years ago.
Yeah, they have, and of course, we.
When they all got sick.
Yeah, that one, the lasagna one, and the one where we won the league at their ground as well. And there's that great story, isn't there, where they had a late penalty, and what's the guy's name? Tarico. He was the defender, and he was laughing at Thierry Henry, and Henry was going, "You're such an idiot. Yeah. We don't even need to win the game." Yeah. When Robbie Keane scored the penalty, and they're all celebrating like crazy, and Henry's saying to me, so they have down the years provided us with many funny moments. So
thank you.
Yeah, I think we can identify with that. Yeah.
But we do live in the age, and you're a beneficiary of it in a way that the sort of technology's allowed you to connect with people all over the world. And instantaneously, I mean, through so many platforms. The dark side of that also is that we've got this overheated hot take culture where every defeat is treated like it's the end of the world, and we have people ranting via social media in ways that we didn't have to either subject ourselves to or hear about in the past. How do you cope with that in what you do? Because you're on the front line of that day after day. You must get plenty of that stuff in your comments.
Well, I mean, it depends what it is. If someone's if someone disagrees with me, that's fine. I've got no issue with that, and I'm always happy to talk to people. If somebody's abusive or being an idiot, then I just ignore it for the most part. But in terms of what I do and what I write and what I talk about, all you can ever do is give your own honest opinion. Because I think you can always stand over that, that you can look back on what you've written and what you've said, and you always know that it was the right thing to say or do at the time. And it's not to say that you're always right or you always get everything spot on. In 15 years of writing it, there have been, a few things I've said down the years that I would have regretted, but I can look back and say, well, that's kind of what I thought at the time. Maybe I could have expressed it better. I think the thing about what happens online is that you do have a choice. You have a choice about whether or not to watch it or to read it or to follow that person or to engage with it. That if somebody annoys you to the point where you want to call them a bad name, maybe you should think about just unfollowing them or not subjecting yourself to that kind of content. So that's the choice everybody has. That it doesn't have to be World War III every time there is a bad result. I mean,
but for Arsenal, it feels like it is, doesn't it?
Yeah, again, it comes back to the familiarity and maybe the monotony of it, or the regularity of it, or the sense that the fact that we can all see certain things, and you go, well, I wish they would change that, and they don't change that, and then that is the thing that costs us a game or a result. It's like, I don't think there's anything wrong with being frustrated or angry or expressing that, but it depends how you express it and how you comport yourself online. Is it the same way that you would comport yourself in real life? Because you think about what the streets would look like if everybody out there was behaving the way people behaved on Twitter. It'd be like people running around with hatchets and bashing each other over the head and what have you. So, there is a need, I think, to recognize that as well. But from an individual basis, it's up to you what you engage with or how you engage with it.
Did you ever get any feedback from the players? Because obviously your stature within the football, from the fan community is held in such high esteem. I'm sure that must filter through, even though they live in a bit of a bubble, to the playing group and the players over the years. And some of them are fans as well as players. So do you ever hear from them?
I don't know, not on a personal level. I know that Cesc was a reader of the site before he went to Barcelona and then became evil by going to Chelsea. And like we did have a nice response from Per Mertesacker one time where I wrote a post about how he was nearly in my top 5 favorite things of all time, and those were beer, bourbon, bacon, puppies, and football. And I said that he was nearly in my top 5, so he was pushing for a place in there. I'm not sure ahead of which one. So he made reference to that in a post on Facebook. I mean, I think it's if you were a player, you'd have to think long and hard about whether you're going to look at what people were saying about you online. Is that the right thing for you to do? Particularly in certain places, if you were somebody whose confidence was easily shaken, it might do you well to stay away altogether.
We've probably had some players who over the years, not all of them stars, who would have enjoyed it. I think Emmanuel Frimpong, he like Frimpong probably would have been into his own social media stuff, wouldn't he?
Yeah. He's gone a bit quiet
What's
recently.
happened to him?
I don't know. I think he was playing in Russia the last I heard, but I don't know.
Never to be seen again.
I don't know where he is at the moment. Yeah, I mean, some players are on it, and I think as generally speaking, people, younger people than I am, are growing up in a social media culture where everything is being shared, and I think you can see that in some of the younger Arsenal players, that they're growing up with Snapchat, they're growing up with Instagram, they're growing up with Twitter, and all those things. Where
do you think it was a fair criticism that was levelled at the players that they would take photos of themselves in the change room after games and post it on Instagram? Was that a generational thing, or do you think that's a cultural thing where they're going?
They're young men, and that's what young men do, and I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with it. It's too easy to sit there and be an old fogey and a cranky whatever, to say, they didn't do that back in my day. Yeah, but nobody had a bloody camera phone, and there was no way for you to do it anyway, even if you wanted to. In fairness, if you look at some of the old books, you can see pictures of Arsenal players in the bath after a game, and there's like 12 naked men in a bath having a good time, having a cigarette and a beer.
Paul Merson collapsed in the background, and
is that the right way to behave? But that's just what people did at the time. So I don't really see that there's anything wrong with it. It's just the way that the world works at this moment in time, and yeah, I'm all right with that. I mean, I don't think players taking pictures of themselves is our issue.
No, maybe not. But we've had some interesting players come and go in the last 10 or 15 years. But what are the couple of players who you've just scratched your head and went, how did he end up in an Arsenal shirt? How did that guy get a run out?
I mean, I have to say, I really enjoyed the Arsenal career of André Santos. I think within about 3 weeks of him joining the club, ESPN in Brazil did a feature with him where he went to a cafe on Blackstock Road, and they sat down with him and he ate an enormous plate of fish and chips. And I was like, oh, this is great. And perhaps that was reflected in his performances. There's something quite performance art about the way that it all went for him.
He did get one goal at Stamford Bridge.
Yeah, it was a good goal too. But I remember in that first half, it was like, what is he doing? And then he came out and had a great second half. Yeah. I mean, look, there have been players down the years who haven't maybe reached the heights that we would like.
Who's the one that drove you nuts?
Silvestre.
Yeah.
Silvestre, I just could not understand why we signed him.
The whole room just...
Yeah, everybody's like, oh, Jesus, what was that? Like, he was about to sign for Manchester City. Man United were happy to let him go to Manchester City, and then we spent 700,000. It's not a lot of money, but still £700,000 is £699,999, and I would have spent on him. And I just don't. I can't get my head around that one at all. He was a disaster, and one of those players who was part of Manchester United when we were hating them. And I find that quite difficult, to turn around and go, what, I have to like this guy now because he's wearing an Arsenal shirt. It was the same with William Gallas. It was like, oh my God, I just can't see again,
Just again.
Yeah, we're human beings. Why are you doing this to us? And
I think incredible sulk.
Yeah. I think within English football there isn't quite the same culture of players moving, because I can always remember watching Italian football and seeing players going from Juventus to Inter Milan, from AC Milan to Roma, and you're going to Lazio, and you're going, that is weird, and particularly Italian fans who are very quick to let players know and let clubs know when they're doing things wrong. But that culture of players going between clubs was never really there, particularly between the top clubs. Liverpool, Manchester United didn't have a player transfer between them for 40 years or 45 years or something. So that wasn't there. So that's something we've had to get used to, but I don't like it.
Which yeah.
Well, you would know, sir.
As I was about to say, there was something that come our way. There have been some truly bizarre ones though. The Park transfer was right up there. And the I know you turned him into a character on your podcast, but the Emery Bischoff signing was one of the strangest things of all time.
Yeah.
Have you ever heard from your Arsenal connections what the hell that either of those transfers? What's the mythology around those two?
I don't know. I mean, you get the people who say we signed Park because we wanted to sell shirts in Korea, and I don't buy that for a second. I mean, that doesn't work. We paid £2.5 million for him, and I don't know how many shirts you'd need to sell to make that much money. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. I think you know, that particular signing came at the end of the 2011 transfer window when we'd just been beaten 8-2 at Old Trafford, and we didn't have any midfield because we'd sold Fabregas and Nasri, and it was absolute bargain shopping trolley dash stuff, which was a club that didn't really manage its summer very well from a transfer perspective. We didn't do things the right way. We went out and bought Mertesacker and Arteta, who were a success. Park came in. Santos came in at that point as well, didn't he? Was that Andrew Santos? Yeah. So he came in as well. So it was really just like, who the hell is available and who can we get? And we had two players who worked out really well. And I think, I don't think they'll ever go down as perhaps the best players that Arsenal have ever had. But I think Arteta and Mertesacker were two players who were really, really important in rebuilding what was an absolute mess, and were instrumental in getting the club back onto a certain track, not to the point where we would have liked it to go, but certainly when it came to winning a couple of FA Cups and 3 FA Cups in 4 years. You know, they played their part in those. I think they were really, really important signings.
You genuinely love Per Mertesacker. Is it because he's a fan as well? He was an Arsenal fan.
I think he understands.
He gets the club.
I think he understands. You know, there was when we got, I keep talking about these terrible defeats, but when we got beaten by Manchester City 6-2 or 6-3, and I think it was Mesut Ozil's first season, and he grabbed him and told him, no, come over, you've got to, you know, acknowledge the fans after a game like that when, you know, they're just going straight down the tunnel. I think he does understand. I think he does know what it means to be a fan, and when you hear him talk, I think he's a really excellent human being and a really good player as well. So it's good to have those people, you know, to have those people at your club instead of evil monsters.
Yeah, we need more of them. Which one of the transfers out hurt the most? Was it Henri's departure, or was it Vieira?
Wasn't Vieira, wasn't Henri. I think it was, on a personal level, it was Cesc to see him go. It wasn't that I was necessarily surprised to see him go. I think we all expected it, but it was why he wanted to go. The reason, I mean, he was, of course, going back to play for his hometown club, the club that he supported as a boy, which was an amazing football team at that time, an amazing group of players. But it was also an acknowledgement that he felt he couldn't win the things that he wanted to win with Arsenal. You know, he was at the club from the age of 16, and I know that people will say now he's, you know, every time you see his name mentioned in an Arsenal context on Twitter, there's about 5,000 snake emojis afterwards. And I don't think it's really that fair, to be honest. He really did have a good connection with the club, and he really did love his time at Arsenal. He really wanted to win things, but he knew that he couldn't. They knew that they weren't going to be able to win the Premier League, and I think that's the reason why his departure hurt the most. It was tacit admission that this was a team that was not going to be capable of winning the league as it stood.
And he did win the league with Chelsea, as we know. So how did you feel when you saw that? I mean,
well, not very good.
No, but your relationship with you know, because as a Fabregas.
Look, I mean, I think you have to remember that it is a job for them. So what's he supposed to do when Arsenal had an option for Cesc Fabregas? They could have come back and brought him back to the club, and they chose not to. So what's he supposed to do? Retire? You know, he's a footballer and he's going to go and play somewhere, and Chelsea are a big club that we're going to win things, and you know, that maybe hurts a little bit as well. But I don't think you can blame the player for, you know, going to work every day. If it's not the right place, you know, it's not up to us to choose where he goes. We had the opportunity to make an impact there. We chose not to take it, and that's what happened.
Robert Pires is your favourite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Robert Pires.
I know, we've kind of worked that out. What is it about the way that he approached his football that you so loved?
He was just so cool. He was really cool, Robert Pires, the way that he played. I don't know how a man who runs like a really fast duck can be cool, but he was, you know, he had the hair, he had the little, you know, the stripe.
The D'Artagnan sort of.
He had the stripe. You know, do people remember he did this ad himself and Sylvain Wiltord for Pumas, you know, where they went and they were talking about ma Pumas. I've got ma Pumas. And I went out and bought a pair of ma Pumas just because there were these bright red trainers that you couldn't ever wear with anything. I just bought them because of him. But he was just a brilliant footballer as well, just a much underrated footballer. Well, I don't know if he was underrated, but the variety in his game, the way that he could score an amazing goal from outside the box, and then if a keeper made a save, he was there for the scruffy rebound. You know, I think he scored 89 goals or something for Arsenal, and 45 of them were brilliant, amazing goals, and the other 45 were just tap-ins. Because he was there, he had that ability to be in the right place at the right time. You know, there were moments where, you know, he was accused of maybe not being up for the English game, but I liked the fact that he got into scraps with people. There was a moment at White Hart Lane where someone threw the ball at him really hard, and he went to throw the ball back at them, and you know, those kind of things. I liked it. I just thought he was a really, really cool guy.
Have you had the chance to interview him or meet him?
I did. Last year I did this charity breakfast thing where I had to interview him in front of we were at the top of a table. There were 24 people paying X hundreds of pounds for a plate of breakfast, and I was able to sit there and interview him, and that was awesome. And he was a really, really, really nice guy as well. He was really happy to chat to everybody and great to interview, and very open about what he talked about, his experience of the club, the way that he left the club, the way that he's come back into the fold, how he viewed the current team. He was great. It was really, it was exciting. I was, you know, nervous as hell. To be perfectly one of those where your legs over the table, try to stop it. But yeah, that was great. No, let's not.
Famously here at the MCG, not one of his better moments. Sometimes when you do something you love and you follow your passion, and whether it was, say, in music or sport, you get so involved that you get a little too close to the thing you love, and it can become hard work, or you almost can kill the thing you love by getting involved in it. Has that happened to you at all? Did you ever get to a point where it was like, oh, you know, too much Arsenal, too much football because you've chosen it?
No, not yet. Not yet. I mean, it's such a big part of what I do, and part of my routine is just to get up every morning and write about Arsenal. And, you know, I think it would be, you know, it would be really taking it for granted if I thought, well, this is a terrible thing. I mean, what a privilege I have to be able to do what I do, and to be able to get up and write, and people read it, and they'll come to events like this, and they'll buy our books, or they'll come to the live podcasts, and I don't take that for granted in any way at all. It's an amazing thing, and it's kind of happened by accident, a really happy accident. But no, I mean, you have to be able to step back a bit from it as well. You have to be able to remember that it is just a game, that it's not the be-all and end-all. It is, of course, hugely important, and you can't be invested in a football team without having passion for it. But you have to be able to sort of step back and realize there are other things as well. But no, I feel really lucky every day to be able to write about the football club and the team that I love, and to be able to, you know, somebody said to me when I started the site, someone's going to bring you to Australia to talk to at something like this, that I thought you were crazy. So it's an amazing thing to be able to do every day, and I feel really lucky to be able to do it.
How many people listen to your podcast these days on average?
We get somewhere between 750,000 and 1 million listens every month, and that's a really fun thing to do. The podcast is great fun because I had a radio background, and just to be able to sort of sit behind a microphone and talk rubbish twice a week or 3 times a week, whatever it might be, is great. I love it.
And the Arsecast Extra with James, you've been doing for a while now too. So
yeah.
That has a different element to it again.
It does. Again, it's good. I mean, it's really good to sort of work with somebody else. You know, when you're sort of working on your own all the time, it's you know, you're always managing that part of it. But to have somebody who you can sit down with and just do a podcast without, again, it's really lucky. It's not hard work for us to sit there and talk about what's gone on, and I mean, it's much easier for us to sit there and talk about Arsenal when Arsenal are doing well or when the result has been good, but you know, you're doing it through thick and thin. You don't get to choose, unfortunately, you know, when you do it. So yeah,
it's either a goodly morning or it's not.
Yeah, I think he's giving you a signal.
All right, I think
there.
it's time to take a few questions from the floor. Just stick your hand in the air and ask away. And Yoshi's down the front. He's going to go first. Good.
Good evening, Andrew. I'm Yoshi, coming from Japan to attend the conference. And I have read your blogs a couple times before I came here. And you are covering about the match report to any like a club or field issues like ownership or forever.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question, just 2 questions. Once, like I am actually writing some AFL stories on a website called Fully Almanac, and I'm a St. Kilda supporter in the AFL. And when I'm writing about the match report, then I have to watch sometimes all over the game. Do you watch any like Arsenal's football matches like all over again? The second question is like about the off-field issues. Do you have to go to the club's headquarters or something like that to cover correct information about relating the issues or not? Thank you.
Okay. Do I watch matches over and over again? No. Like once is enough, generally.
Oh, you got so many.
Yeah, no, but you can. I will download every game. After the game, you can download the games and you can watch incidents that, if you need to see it again or try and work out exactly what happened, then I will rewatch certain incidents, like goals or red cards, something like that, so you can understand exactly how it happened.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, I will watch bits, but not the whole game.
Yeah, truly. I'm happy to hear that.
Okay, good. Yeah, it's less work for you. And the other question was about the
relationship with the club. You don't have to go to the club to talk to them to get information.
No, I mean, occasionally we will ask the press officer for some information, and he will usually give you a one-word reply, which is yes or no, or I can't say right now. But yeah, that's the only sort of access that we have from that point of view, is sort of emails or Twitter DMs to the press office. So yeah.
Oh, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Some more questions for Andrew? The hands are in the air now. We'll start down over this and work our way across. Yeah.
Thanks. First of all, just Andrew, thank you so much for everything you do. I think you may underappreciate sometimes how much joy you bring to people on the other side of the world, being able to hear everything that you do and the way that you talk about Arsenal. My question is really, one of the things I enjoy the most about the ÄrseBlog is you manage to be more neutral and less groupthink than a lot of the other football podcasts. I think every time you switch on your phone, another 3 or 4 podcasts about football appear, and they tend to all talk about the same stuff. My question is, what podcasts do you listen to, and which journalists do you read about, and kind of who inspires you at the moment?
When it comes to podcasts, I kind of use them as a way of switching off from football. So I don't tend to listen to too many football podcasts. I listen to the Second Captains guys, who are Irish guys, who do a really good football podcast, I think, and it's sort of, because it's based out of Ireland, maybe it's easier for me to connect with. In terms of the journalists that I like to write or read, from an Arsenal point of view, I think when you read what Amy Lawrence writes, I think she always finds, she doesn't shirk the issues, but I think she has a really good way of presenting her issues and how she puts forward her arguments and how she writes. I think Amy's, probably the best Arsenal journalist on the beat, to be perfectly honest.
And you have her on regularly on your podcast?
She's been on the podcast lots of times, so she's great as well. And just from the point of view that, for me, what I like is when I read something and I think, I hadn't thought about it like that. I always enjoy that part of it, and Amy has a way of doing that. So yeah, that's it.
Just on Amy Lawrence, I remember, I think she was writing about Ray Parler's memoir, Real Romford Pele,
Yeah.
where he said that Igor Stepanov's was the worst Arsenal signing he'd seen. After I think Arsenal had brought him in for a trial, and he was playing so badly in a trial that the Arsenal back four were Bronx cheering him, ironically, and Wenger mistook that for affirmation and signed him. So.
And was part of that back four that day at Old Trafford where they scored like
6.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, that was part of the story.
This is a therapy session. Now.
Just, I know in the last 24 hours or so, Stan Kroenke's been doing the rounds, doing interviews and so forth after the AGM, which only Arsenal seem to do, and which is a bit of a circus in itself. But he's been saying all the right things about how he's in it for the long haul and how he wants to win
That's
trophies.
Not the right thing.
Or how he wants to win trophies and blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Honestly, do you see any sort of silver lining in his ownership, given the, if you only look across the Atlantic to his teams in America, which chronically underperform, which seems to sadly be the case with Arsenal?
I think there was an opportunity for him to actually address people in a meaningful way at the AGM, because there was that tension in the room. He'd given the interview, I think it was before, it was like a really fluffy marshmallow piece about, it's easy to say all those things. But I think, when people were making their unhappiness unclear at the AGM, all Stan Kroenke had to do was stand up and say, look, I understand your frustration, but I am committed to this football club. I wanted to win things. I will do everything within my power to help this football club win things. You might not believe me, but judge me by my actions, not by my words. That's all he had to say. Maybe people wouldn't have believed him, but it would be better than sitting there saying absolutely nothing, right? And I think you have to read a lot into that silence. I think we have to read a lot into the fact that the board and Stan Kroenke were quite split when it came to the future of Arsene Wenger. Regardless of what the board thought or how they voiced their objections, there was only one man who could make the decision, and he made the decision to extend Arsene Wenger's contract. So, are the board, whatever we might think about issues between the manager and the board, there's issues between the owner and the board. And I think, it's a bit sad to see when certain people were objecting to a contract renewal for Arsene Wenger and then going out and giving speeches about how great Arsene Wenger is when they didn't want him to sign a new deal. If you have the courage of your convictions or some integrity, maybe that should inform the way that you behave. So I'm quite worried, really, to be honest. I'm quite worried about what will happen when Arsene Wenger leaves, because he is such a fundamental part of the fabric of the club that I wonder how we're going to cope when he goes, because there are a lot of things that need to happen when that happens, and do we have the people in place to make those things happen? David Moyes, yeah. John Gregory, get him in.
John Gregory.
Did you have any people that you were inspired by, or played when you were growing up?
Who was from a football point of view?
Yeah.
Liam Brady. Yeah. He was, I always wanted to be a brilliant left-footed midfield player, but unfortunately I lacked both the brilliance and the left foot. So I was a slow centre half. I still am a slow centre half. Not getting any faster, but yeah, Liam Brady was a hero. Yeah.
Andrew, could you just say a bit about your transition from being tech person to being radio or voice person, and how that came about, and how easy or difficult was it to make that decision?
I was always a radio person. My first job in radio was at 15 in a pirate radio station in Dublin. So I worked on the radio and as the presenter and as a voiceover person until I was about 25, and I was also DJing, nightclub DJ as well, which is why I was often up really late at night. But that's a different story. But what happened was I got into a car accident, and I broke my arm and I couldn't DJ, and then I had to go get a real job, and that is where I ended up in that sort of tech support world. So I did as much as I could to get myself out of that because it was just not for me. You know, I think if you're a look, I'm not a statistical or analytical person. I think my brain is a creative brain. I think if you're in a job that doesn't allow you to express yourself creatively, it becomes very difficult and a bit. You can get disillusioned with your working life, and certainly by the time I'd left that job, I was, fit to jump out a window. So, that's why, I feel really lucky to be able to do what I do, because it allows me to be creative and I can do what I want when I want. And so that was it. It wasn't so much a transition as a sort of it was on then off and back on again. So that's it.
I think there's another question. Try to get to as many questions as we can. I think up the back.
First of all, I would just want to say thank you so much for all the pleasure you brought me over the last few years. And
you're welcome.
And I'm sure I speak for many people here when you've stayed up till 5 a.m. and we've watched a defeat or a last-minute goal. Listening to you and James assess the match is a beautiful form of catharsis. So thank you very much for that.
All right, you're welcome.
In true ÄrseBlog extra fashion, I've got a serious question and a silly question.
Okay.
Which one would you like?
Let's do them both quickly. Go on.
Okay. Serious question. How do you feel like XG, and there's a new PP value added thing these days? How do you feel about statistics in today's game? Do you think it's too serious? And my second question is, if you could have reanimate any past or present Arsenal player to make sure they stayed in our team forever, who would you pick?
Right. I think the XG stuff I think is really interesting. It's not how my brain works. I can't look at stuff and work things out statistically.
So tell people what that is.
Well, expected goals is a measure of it's a way of measuring how many teams a goal should score based on the chances or the shots that they've had from the various positions that they've had. So if you have 10 shots from outside the box, your expected goals score is very low because you're not expected to score. But if you have 8 shots from inside the 6-yard box, then your expected goal score is higher. But I think it's got to be taken in conjunction in an overall way, right? You can't just say, let's focus entirely on statistics and make our decisions on that. I think you use statistics to inform what you already know, what you can see. I think there's people at both ends of it get a bit carried away where they go, oh, XG is a load of rubbish, and then there are other people who will say XG is the be all and end all. I think it's a way of, it's got to be a combination of things. So you can use statistics, but you can also use your eyes, and you can say, well, look, we might have had an expected goals thing of whatever.
We could win the expected goals league.
Yeah, well, yeah, that might be a trophy. That might be a trophy that we can win. And the other question, if I could take one player back and keep him fit forever, certainly when it comes to this current Arsenal side, I think I would go for Patrick Vieira, just because our midfield is in dire need of reinforcement. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think there's some. We'll try and work our way.
Yeah, we should go over the other side of the room for a minute.
I remember you posting on ÄrseBlog about kind of canvassing views about a freemium model, about sort of would people pay for content, for example.
Yeah.
And you sort of voiced the example of the second captains and what they've been doing. So what is the future of ÄrseBlog in that sense?
Are you going to cross that threshold?
Yeah, I think we are.
I'd pay for it.
Oh, thanks. I think we have to, because more and more I think people are going to block advertising on websites, because the advertising on websites gets to the point where you've got no choice but to block it. And we try as much as we can when it comes to advertising to make it as unobtrusive as possible, and not to sort of have pop-ups and all those kind of things. So it's about finding the balance between what we're doing with the site at the moment and what we could do in the future, and how do we do that. So I think the response we got to that question was really, really very positive, that there are people who will support the site. I don't think, there's no way that we will ever make anything that's available now behind a paywall.